This morning, Steven Langford in, along with Joe Shasky. It is the morning roast, and we have our guest right here on the line, Joe, so let's get right to him. Scot Mccloughan, of course, former GM with the 49ers and vice president of player personnel when the 49ers drafted Frank Gore in 2005, and that's who we're talking about today because Frank Gore signed a one-day contract with the 49ers and will retire with the team once that contract is up. So we're very happy to be joined by Scot Mccloughan. Scott, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Can you believe that in 2022, I don't know if you imagined that back when you drafted Frank Gore in 2005 that we'd be talking about his retirement 17 years after the fact. Did you expect that when you drafted Frank Gore, Scott?
Absolutely not. You never think that with any player, to tell you the truth. Possibly a punter, kicker, snapper, but not a running back for sure.
Well, take me back to the times when you guys were looking at him, because third-round pick, and I remember being a Niner fan thinking about the quarterback position. Everyone goes back to Aaron Rodgers and Alex Smith, but, I mean, that really was one of the great draft picks in 49er history. But I'm looking at the U back then, and I'm like, dude, there was McGahee, Portis, Najee Davenport, Edgerrin James even slightly before him. How did you guys even identify Frank Gore, number one, and like who was banging the table to take him in the third round?
It's funny from my standpoint. When I first saw him, I believe I was the director of college scouting for the Seahawks my first time through Seattle, and I saw him play his true freshman year. And you talk about the backs that were in front of him, and it was a blowout game, and he came in the fourth quarter. And if you didn't know better, you would think he was as good or better than the two backs that played before him in that game. They were both first-round picks, of course. It was unique because you see a true freshman, and you see not just the physical abilities, but the mental abilities to fit right in. And as you said, at the University of Miami at the time, they had some studs. They had legit NFL football players on that field. And being that young and fitting in that quick, you knew he was ready, from the standpoint physically and mentally. Now, he went through a lot of stuff, at the university with injuries. And that's what affected his career from the standpoint of his draft status. But as a scout, you never forget those young guys. They're playing against good competition, and they stand out. Because if they're 18, 19, going against 22, 23-year-olds and dominating like he was, now it was the fourth quarter, but still, I saw the same thing with Anquan Bolden when he came out as a freshman. It's just, they stick in your mind. So I always had him in my mind winning, year after year after year. And then he came draft eligible, of course, and came out in the draft. It was one of the things that we just studied him. And the reason he fell, the only reason he fell, is because of medical. Seeing the talent and seeing that. And in the last year playing at the University of Miami, he played about 230. So he was overweight. And he knew it. I knew it. People that understood him knew it. He wasn't the same guy he was going to be, because I knew he'd get down to 215. 212 because he knew he had it to play in the NFL, and of course he did. And, very excited. Yeah, it's funny because I told Coach McCarthy at the time, who was our OC, probably 2 months before the draft, I said, listen, I don't know who we're taking in the first yet. I don't know who we're taking in the second yet, but I'm telling you this. If Frank Gore's there with the first pick in the third round, I promise you we're going to take him. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if he's going to be there, but the only reason he would be there is because of medical. That's why he fell, and it's been a great career since then, and a really good friendship him and I have had.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the great draft picks in Niner history. Like, there's no other way around it, especially where you guys selected him. And he backs up Kevin Barlow, right? And everybody knows he eventually takes Barlow's job. Norv Turner comes in, and I don't know, maybe I'm too nostalgic over this, but he goes for almost 1,700 yards. Larry Allen on that offensive line, it was a match made in heaven. And Norv Turner leaves. If Norv Turner doesn't leave, do you think Frank Gore has a couple more seasons that more replicate that 1,700-yard season as opposed to some of the decrepit offenses that they had just after that?
I don't know for sure. The thing is unique. His first 2 years, he had two really good OCs, different OCs from the standpoint, McCarthy being more of a West Coast type offense, and having, we went through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback and had to play Alex eventually. And of course, at the time he wasn't ready, but Norv came in, kind of switched it up, more of a run game. And the thing that was unique about his second year, and that was 06 with Norv, is the fact, a lot of teams are 8 in the box. People don't realize that. And that's not easy to run against in the NFL at all. And Frank still put up those numbers. And it just goes to show kind of back. He was in the O-line improved, from 05 to 06, which was very, very important. But I think what made Frank so unique was the fact that he could adjust to anything, and he would adjust to anything because his makeup is, listen, I'm a football guy. It doesn't matter what scheme they throw me in. If I'm running outside, on the perimeter, if I'm running inside between the tackles, it doesn't matter. I'm going to make plays no matter what. And I don't care who's in front of me. With Barlow sitting there that first year, it drove him nuts. He wasn't the starter. And he came in the first day and told me, so I'm going to beat him out. I said, do it. I said, that's what this is all about, competition. And he did, and as you guys are well aware, he's not a man of many words.
No.
But him and I would talk, and just seeing the look in his eye, he was ready to get after it, and he did, and our team got better and better, and the O-line improved, and, not knocking the guys that they were in 05 at all who block it up front. They were doing the best they could, but Frank was just one of those guys that just, made people around him better. The O-line wanted to block for him. The tight ends wanted to block for him. The receivers down the field wanted to block for him because they disrespected him so much, and they cared for him so much just because who he was and how he was wired. And ended up, his career has been great, but just seeing the development of him and how he took care of himself, play as long as he did, of course, but how he cared about the team and how, passionate before the game he would speak, and halftime he would speak. He'd start crying, and people would know it wasn't just BS. That was him. He was that passionate about the team and about winning, and it just, as you saw the team each year get better and better, and eventually, later on getting the Super Bowl, and that's one of his biggest accomplishments. He'll say to this day, was just playing in that. Of course, he wanted to win it and get back to it another time, but just knowing how important not just his physical skills on the field were, but what he brought to the entire team. It was very unique.
Talking Frank Gore here with Scot Mccloughan, of course, former 49ers GM. He was the VP of player personnel when they drafted Frank Gore in 2005. And I want to go back to your first answer, Scott, talking about when you did draft him, because I'm sure there was some skepticism around drafting a guy who had 2 ACL injuries during his college career. What were those conversations like with the skeptics among the organization who maybe were unsure about drafting a running back with that type of injury history?
It's something that, me being lucky enough to be around football pretty much my entire life, my father, being with the Raiders and stuff. It's something, the medical aspect, and that's from the combine, which the combine is so important because you have your own doctors put their hands on each guy that has red flags. And you don't want to buck the system too often because if you go against the doctors with the medical, because these are young guys and they're coming up, with 2 ACLs, and he also had a bad shoulder, So, you're thinking of a running back who loves to live with, getting low and playing with leverage and playing with power, and as everybody knows, the average career in the NFL for backs is 3+ years. But it was something where I sat on top of the doctors, and at first they're like, this is very, very borderline if we could even get on passing grade. Well, which of course I talked them into the passing grade. I said, you have to pass them, but talking with ownership and talking with coaches was, listen, we're not going to take him in the first, we're not going to take him in the second. My personal opinion is his value as a football player is first round. His skill level is the first round, and you throw in the makeup mentally, he is definitely a first-round prospect. Listen, if we get to the third, I don't mind start taking shots on guys in the third that have some medical or maybe have some background issues that we feel okay with when we make the pick, and understand that we make the pick, there is a chance for his longevity to be shortened. But as it is right now with the averages, we get 3 years out of him, I'm telling you, it'll be 3 great years. And the coaches are able to get on board with it. And they're like, okay, I can see that in the third round, because everybody thought he was going to go in the second, just because of what he did early in his career at Miami. But then he got to the third, and we took him, and everybody was like, we'll see, And I was a little bit skeptical, too, myself, just because he was banged up, and he didn't live with this pure speed and quickness. He was a banger, and he loved contact, and that's how he survived. And the son of a gun got in there, and I think I heard a thing that he missed 15 games in 16 years.
Oh,
think about that. For any player. Any player in the NFL history to go through something like that, and him coming out with 2 ACLs and a banged-up shoulder. It's just incredible.
Yeah, you referenced something there. I call him and Anquan Boldin kind of the savants of their position. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the most speedy guys, but yet they just find a way to make plays and continue to churn out yardage and help teams win. You reference his character, and there's something about that era of Niners. You got Staley, you got Willis. I'd throw Justin Smith, even though he was acquired in free agency, Vernon Davis. What was it about all of those guys in terms of their character and them not getting the ring? Because I'm devastated that these guys don't have that Super Bowl ring. I feel like people outside the Bay Area won't acknowledge acknowledge how great they were because they didn't have that validation. And it just seems so silly and unfair. And it stinks that he doesn't have it, And the character, though, for those guys, I can't get over it because it changed the organization.
Yeah, it did, and that was highly important to us, as a group, and not kind of beating the heads of the scouts, on college side and the pro side. Listen, we need to build this thing. We understand the players are here. I respect them. They're in the NFL. I get it, but I'm used to being around a Green Bay team that won the back-to-back Super Bowls and won one, and I've seen how Ron Wolf built it, and I understood it's football players first and foremost. Talent's very, very important. Don't get me wrong. But it's how they're wired. What makes the average guy good, the good guy great, and the great guy special. I knew we were going to struggle early. And, of course, that's the reason I got hired. That's the reason Mike Nolan got hired. Because they wanted to go a different direction. And, my first impression, and I told these guys when they came in the door the first time, I said, listen, we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days. We're going to have good weeks and bad weeks, good months and bad months. But the one thing I want everybody to understand is it's very important to me that if we do get beat, if we go out on Sunday, I want everybody to compete and compete hard, but I want them to understand who they played. And that was the 49ers from the standpoint of physicalness. And that plays into the mental makeup because, that we were down 14, 17, 21 points in the fourth quarter, and our guys were still battling. And those guys you mentioned were the cornerstones to build that. And all of a sudden, now the next year, the rookie comes in or a free agent comes through the door, they look at the leaders, and those are the leaders, and that's the way they approach it every day, even in the off season. And I think that's how you had to do it. And I was very lucky to hit on some of them cats because, the draft's not exact science. And you think about 75% of them. You're lucky if you know 50% of these guys. But you can, like a Vernon Davis, when you saw him get drafted, those are legit tiers. What he'd been through in his life and what he overcame in his life prior to that. And I think, talent's 50% of it, there's no doubt about it. And the speed and the quickness and the God-given leaping ability and positions specifics are given from God. But the other stuff is more so what they've been through in their life. And that's how it's so important when you sit down and talk to them, you talk to the coaches, and you talk to other teammates and guys that have been around them. When you start hitting on those guys, now you got a foundation you can build on. Doesn't mean you're going to be the best. You can have a dynasty, anything like that. But you're going to have a competitive team that goes out every week. And those guys, and Frank was definitely one of the leaders of that. And I told him yesterday about that. And, he that was important to him. And again, he wasn't out there beating his chest to the media saying, got to do this, got to do that. The O-line's not blocking well enough for this or that. They just came together. And it was a very, very good part of my career. There's no doubt about it.
Well, you certainly made the right pick in the third round in the 2005 draft, Scott. Scot Mccloughan, thanks so much for joining us this morning and talking about Frank Gore here.
Thank you, fellas.